The mournful howl cut through the frigid air, shattering the harsh silence that enveloped the night. Ron let out a heavy sigh, fully aware of the anguish that was interwoven within those otherworldly cries. He brushed off the light layer of snow that had settled on his shoulders, rose to his feet, and began to pace around the frost-covered pine tree that he had chosen as his waiting spot for her arrival. The moment he had been dreading was drawing near, and uncertainty gnawed at him, leaving him questioning whether he was truly prepared for what lay ahead. With a sense of nostalgia, he removed the silver ring from his finger, pressed it to his lips in a tender kiss, and then clutched it tightly in his fist, savoring every fleeting second before the inevitable confrontation. He lamented the day. He had decided to embrace the life of a hunter. But more than that, he now found himself cursing the day when his hunting duties had intruded upon his personal life. His carelessness had come at a great cost, and now he faced the daunting task of making reparations in the most harrowing manner possible. The sound of her heavy footsteps crunching through the snow and the unmistakable snapping of twigs resonated from the nearby woods, echoing in the stillness of the night. Even from this distance, he could hear her labored breathing, each exhale striking against his eardrums like a relentless drumbeat. The rhythm of her breaths felt like a painful blow to his heart, pushing him to the brink of tears that he desperately fought to hold back, determined not to let them spill over and betray his emotions. Once again, her haunting howl pierced the quietude surrounding him. He lifted his gaze to the luminous full moon above and pressed his lips against the ring once more, sensing that she was drawing nearer. With a tightening grip, he held on to the symbol of his commitment, distorting its once perfect circular form as he stepped back into the shadow cast by the pine tree. Tentatively, he reached beneath his coat, his fingers closing around the handle of his antique muzzleloader pistol, an heirloom bestowed upon him by her father, given in lieu of a dowry that he could not afford. Ron glanced down at the flap of his jacket, where the initials of the old man were etched into the finely polished wooden grip, a testament to the bond they once shared. In a gesture that was both clumsy and heartfelt, her father had scratched out his own initials and replaced them with Ronald's, a meaningful act that Ron had always appreciated despite its awkwardness. He drew the pistol from its resting place and, after tearing away the paper end of a powder cartridge with his teeth, carefully poured the propellant into the barrel, preparing himself for the difficult task that lay ahead. He had always been acutely aware that there was a possibility their time together could be fleeting. This understanding was simply a part of his profession, a reality he had come to accept over the years. Yet, despite this awareness, he never anticipated that their story would conclude in such a devastating manner. He had always harbored the belief that he would be the first to meet his end. Throughout all the evils he had confronted, the countless monsters he had vanquished, and amidst the splendors of heaven and the horrors of hell, he could never have foreseen a calamity as tragic as this one. Although he understood the harsh truths of his existence, he found it impossible to approach this situation with the same detached coldness that he typically reserved for his usual targets. This was different. This was the love of his life, the very essence that ignited a fire within his otherwise passionless and frigid existence. As Ron felt the tension build within him, he became acutely aware of the sound of crunching snow approaching. Closer. He inhaled deeply through his nostrils, savoring the familiar scent of her perfume that lingered in the air. In that moment, he wished he could envelop himself in that fragrance and freeze time, allowing him to revel in it for an eternity. It was the same delightful aroma of roses that had always accompanied her letters during his absences, as well as her presence when they were together. Now, however, that scent would forever haunt his memories, leaving him yearning for the days that preceded this fateful night. His expression twisted in discomfort as another smell invaded his senses. The metallic tang of fresh blood penetrated his nostrils, cleverly masked by the sweet floral notes, much like an assassin blending into a crowd, poised to shatter the innocence of his cherished recollections. It served as a bitter reminder of what she had tragically become. Ronald found himself wishing fervently that he had chosen a different path in life, perhaps a more conventional career as a banker. He had always possessed a knack for numbers, or at least that was what she had often insisted. They could have relocated to a bustling city, started a family, and enjoyed the simple pleasures of growing old together. But deep down, he knew that was not a feasible option for him. He had been born into this life, meticulously prepared for this dark and twisted role. He was destined to carry on the family legacy, yet he had made earnest attempts, foolish as they may have been, to carve out some semblance of a normal life alongside it. And now, here he stood, facing the consequences of those choices. This was the outcome of his efforts, the price he had to pay for bearing the weight of the family torch. However, flames are insatiable, and the fire had crept dangerously close to his hand without him even realizing it. At last, he felt the searing burn of its consequences. She emerged from the dense tree line, stepping into the moonlit clearing where she could be seen clearly. The light of the moon illuminated a striking crimson sheen that glistened vividly against her mutated form, which was covered in thick fur. Suddenly, she halted in her tracks, lifting her snout high into the air as she began to sniff cautiously, searching for the familiar scent that lingered nearby. He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment settle upon him. There was no escaping what had to be done. Despite the emotional turmoil it caused him, he recognized that her suffering far surpassed his own pain. This was going to be the most difficult decision he had ever faced, yet he reminded himself of the promises they had exchanged long ago. He had vowed to support her through all circumstances, whether in sickness or in health. Now, as she lay afflicted, he understood that only death could bring her relief. Regardless of how it unfolded, tonight those sacred vows would confront the harsh reality of their conclusion. Tonight they would say goodbye. Ronald stepped out from the shelter of the pine trees, his heart heavy with sorrow. He let his now bent silver wedding ring slip down the barrel of the muzzleloader, carefully flicking the side to ensure it settled securely atop the powder resting at the bottom. With determination, he extended the pistol before him, aiming directly at her heart as he moved closer, intent on achieving perfect accuracy. Their gazes locked as the soft lunar glow enveloped him, and he felt a tear escape, breaking through the defenses he had built around his emotions. Her eyes retained the same beautiful blue that had captivated him years ago, but now there was no spark of recognition in their depths. Instead, her pupils were fixed intently on him. Blood and saliva dripped from her jaws, marring the pristine white snow beneath them. A low growl rumbled from her throat. With trembling hands, he pulled back the hammer of the gun and took one final deep breath, allowing the world around him to settle into a calm focus. "Cecilia," Ron said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. In response, she unleashed a roar, and the sharp crack of a single gunshot shattered the tranquility of the forest. A haunting howl echoed through the stillness of the night once more, reverberating with the weight of their shared history and the pain of their parting. Over the last couple of days, I've encountered an experience that is truly out of the ordinary. It's something I'm still trying to wrap my head around. The Appalachian countryside is quite peculiar, steeped in superstition and folk customs. The locals, witches, are believed to wander the hills and hollows, searching for innocent souls to cast their spells upon. Even in our modern scientific era, there are still corners of the world where magic reigns supreme. I recently inherited a cottage in West Virginia. Inherited seems like the right term, considering I feel as if I might need an exorcism after everything that's transpired in just 2 days. My uncle bequeathed it to me in his will, and although I intended to visit, my busy schedule left little room for it. My uncle was quite eccentric, but then again, most of my family is a bit odd. I'm considered the black sheep, you see. I turned out fairly normal and chose a career in journalism. I'm all about facts, which is why I'm jotting down this journal entry, hoping that whoever stumbles upon it will take my words seriously. On October 30th, my brother Marty, my wife Janet, and I made our way to Crooked Horn, WV. The maples had transformed into vibrant hues of yellow, red, and orange, making the drive delightful. The mountains loomed ominously over the highway, almost giving off a menacing vibe, as if geological formations could indeed pose a threat. The surrounding area was filled with farmland. Massive harvesting machines were busy collecting corn, while sheep, goats, and cattle roamed the hills, grazing contentedly. Scarecrows stood watch over the fields, ever-present guardians of the crops. It wasn't until later that I would realize just how significant those scarecrows really were. "What a beautiful place," exclaimed Janet. "We should have spent our honeymoon here." "If only I had known we could have saved a fortune," I replied. "Oh, come on, Peter," Janet said, playfully swatting my arm. Marty chimed in. "Antigua isn't exactly budget-friendly." I could see his grin reflected in the rearview mirror. As we made our way into the heart of the town, it was clear that the locals were bustling with activity. They appeared to be gearing up for a festival. With Halloween just around the corner, I guessed it might be some kind of masquerade celebration. I wasn't too far off in my assumption. On the outskirts of the town, there was an old, run-down country church typical of small towns. In the center of the village, there was a large stack of lumber and straw, with people still adding more wood to it. "That looks like a bonfire," Janet remarked. "We should check it out." "I think that sounds great," Marty replied. We stopped at a gas station and a local store to refuel. As we entered, the customers and employees regarded us with a hint of suspicion. "Hello there," I greeted. "Good afternoon," the clerk responded. "What brings you to Crooked Horn?" "I inherited the McCormick cottage," I explained. The man seemed to deflate like a wilted lettuce leaf. "I don't remember old Cyrus having any children," a middle-aged woman nearby commented, her gaze sending chills down my spine. She had a look reminiscent of a witch from a fairy tale, and I would later discover just how accurate that impression was. "We're his nephews," my brother chimed in. "I see," the clerk said, nodding. "We thought we'd come take a look at what we've inherited," I added. "You have a charming town here," Janet complimented. "We're excited to spend more time in the area." The clerk locked eyes with her and smiled broadly. "Yes, ma'am," he exclaimed. "It's a nice, quiet place." Janet pointed southward, continuing. "I noticed you're building a bonfire. Is there a party happening?" "Yes, ma'am," the clerk confirmed. "We do this every year on Halloween." "We'd love to join in," Janet said enthusiastically. "We'd be thrilled to have you," the woman who resembled a witch replied. "We start around sundown and keep going until midnight," the clerk added. "That sounds like a fantastic time," I said. After purchasing some local produce, we headed back to our car. Just as we were getting in, I caught sight of a scarecrow in the field across the road. I could have sworn I saw it move. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we pulled into the quaint cottage. The short dirt road led us to a cozy spot nestled between two hills and enveloped by trees, with a gentle stream flowing nearby. On the front porch, Howard, the caretaker, was seated on a bench, strumming an old guitar. He was a tall, lean black man, sporting a straw hat tilted jauntily to one side. His attire consisted of stained overalls, a flannel shirt, and well-worn work boots. Living in a small shanty down the road, he took care of the cottage and its grounds when it wasn't occupied. My uncle allowed him to stay there rent-free, giving him the freedom to hunt and fish as he pleased. A broad smile spread across his face as we stepped out of the car. "You must be the McCormick boys," he said, extending his hand for a shake. "I'm Peter and this is Marty," I introduced myself. "And this is my wife, Janet." "Howdy," Howard greeted everyone warmly, shaking hands all around. "I'll take your bags inside." We climbed the porch steps and entered the cottage. The walls were adorned with wood paneling, except for the fireplace wall, which was made of rustic fieldstone. Taxidermied animals and antlers decorated the walls, while an old grandfather clock ticked away in the corner. The only furniture was rustic wooden pieces. As I turned around, I noticed an old horseshoe hanging above the doorframe. To my surprise, all three doorways in the house featured horseshoes. Given my uncle's superstitious nature, this didn't shock me. He always kept a rabbit's foot in his pocket. "This place is charming," Janet remarked as she surveyed the cottage. "Nice spot," Marty added. "How's the hunting around here?" Howard, who had just come in with our bags, replied, "Mr. Cyrus and I usually have good luck." He glanced at our luggage. "You packed quite a bit." "We're here for a week," I informed him. "I wouldn't advise that," Howard cautioned. "Why not?" I asked, puzzled. "This isn't the best time for visitors," he explained. "What do you mean?" Janet inquired. "With harvest season and everything, it's not ideal for out-of-towners," he replied. "The locals seem friendly enough," Janet observed. "They appear that way," Howard agreed, but he didn't elaborate further, even when I pressed him during dinner. The next morning, October 31st, I was jolted awake by a terrifying scream. I sprang out of bed in the master bedroom and dashed down the hallway, where I found Janet standing outside the bathroom, her face frozen in shock. She was drenched and wrapped in just a towel. Marty came rushing down the hall, and I instinctively positioned myself to protect Janet. Upon realizing she was exposed, Marty quickly turned away. "What happened?" I inquired. "I saw someone peering through the window," she exclaimed, pointing at the bathroom window, which had its curtain drawn. "Maybe it was just an animal," Marty suggested. "No, it was definitely a person. I swear," Janet insisted passionately. Marty stepped outside to investigate while I assisted Janet in getting dressed. When he returned, he confirmed there was definitely someone at the window. "Who would do such a thing?" Janet exclaimed. "Spying on a woman while she's trying to take a bath, how rude." Suddenly I heard the front door creak open, followed by Howard's deep voice. "Breakfast," he called out. "I hope I'm not too early." We all made our way into the dining area, where Howard stood with a basket full of eggs. "Fresh eggs," he announced, raising his eyebrows playfully. "Howard, have you seen anyone lurking around the cottage?" Marty asked. "No, sir," Howard replied. "Why? Did you see someone sneaking about?" "I did," Janet interjected. "Someone was at the window while I was taking a bath." Howard's expression shifted, his brow furrowed and lips formed a frown, his eyes widening in a mix of horror that he tried to conceal. "Are you sure?" he questioned. "Absolutely," Marty affirmed. "I found tracks. People around here can be quite curious about outsiders," Howard remarked. "Oh, very curious indeed," Janet retorted. "Perverts. You speak of the locals as if you're scared of them," I noted. "Is there something I should know, Howard?" "Nothing. You'd believe," he replied cryptically. He left it at that, and although my instincts as a reporter urged me to dig deeper, I hesitated to press him further. In hindsight, I should have demanded more information. Later that afternoon, Marty and I decided to go for a hike in the hills while Janet opted to explore the town and do some shopping. "Do you think Howard could have been the one spying on Janet?" I asked. "Nah," Marty said. "The tracks were the wrong size. Howard has big feet. Whoever was watching you was smaller and lighter." I had faith in Marty's tracking abilities. If he said Howard wasn't involved, then I believed him. "Perhaps a teenage boy," I suggested. "That would be about the right size," Marty replied. We stumbled upon a clearing nestled between two hills, where a small stream flowed. Odd symbols were etched into the trees, and tattered pieces of fabric dangled from the branches. Animal skulls were strategically placed around the area. "This place is so strange," Marty remarked. It had an unsettling atmosphere that was difficult for me to describe. We decided it was best to head back to the cottage. Upon our return, we found that Janet was missing. Surely her quick trip to the village couldn't have taken this long. Just then, Howard walked into the cottage carrying a basket filled with fruit. "Good afternoon, gentlemen." I gazed down at the object clutched in my hand, observing as crimson droplets fall rhythmically from the cold metallic blades onto the pristine tile floor. The once immaculate white stone is now marred by the vivid red stains. "Ava, are you okay?" Mrs. Mullen inquires, her expression a mix of concern and worry as her brows knit together. "You look rather pale, dear. Do you need to visit the nurse?" "I'm not sick," I managed to utter, though the words escape my lips with an agonizing strain, as if each syllable is a struggle. I blink rapidly, then tightly shut my eyes, trying to block out the sight before me. The blood remains vivid in my mind. The stark white tiles seem to glow in contrast. When I finally open my eyes again, Mrs. Mullen is still hovering over me, her lip caught between her teeth in apprehension. "Ava, sweetheart, it's perfectly fine. You really should head to the nurse's office. It's my directive, dear. Eric, could you please escort her to the nurse?" she requests gently. "Of course, Mrs. M," Eric replies with a casual air. "I've got it covered." He flashes a smile in my direction, and I find myself fixated on his lips. They appear full and vibrant, a deep shade of red. Too red for comfort. A wave of nausea rises within me, and I fight the urge to retch, swallowing hard to suppress it. My gaze trails the blood as it continues to drip, drip, drip. It forms a line on the floor, creating a path that leads directly to it. The body lies motionless on the white tile, a black sneaker resting nearby. "Do you need some assistance?" Eric asks, extending his hand toward me with a lopsided grin. His green eyes sparkle with a strange light. I take a moment to examine his fingers. Each nail is impeccably clean and neatly trimmed, while his skin appears rough and dry, presenting an odd contrast. Ignoring his outstretched hand, I push myself up to stand. I notice a flicker of something in his eyes, but before I can decipher it, he's smiling again and shoving his hand into his pocket. Dazed and bewildered, I turn my gaze away. What is going on? "I can manage on my own," I assert through clenched teeth. The vivid memory, or was it merely a recollection, of the blood, the white tiles, and the sneaker flooding my thoughts, overwhelming me. I struggle to recall how I ended up here. My surroundings feel disorienting, everything appearing hazy and unfocused. In this moment, all that exists are the tiles and the blood. Mrs. Mullen instructed me to accompany you. Honestly, I think she has a valid point. "You look like you might be about to lose your lunch," he remarks, turning toward the door. He holds it open for me, gesturing with his other hand, still wearing that crooked grin. A surge of nausea washes over me again. I tighten my fists and walk through the doorway with stiff movements. Eric follows closely behind, and the door slams shut with a resounding thud. An eerie silence envelops us, broken only by the sound of our footsteps echoing against the tiled floor. My gaze wanders further, taking in the details of black sneakers that seem to absorb all light, then shifts to the black jeans that cling tightly, followed by the sleek black leather jacket that adds an air of mystery. The hands remain, still, almost lifeless. I notice the black hair, a dark curtain framing a face that is shrouded in shadow. There's an overwhelming presence of darkness surrounding me, a silence that feels thick and suffocating, and an unsettling stillness that permeates the atmosphere. "Here, come this way." Eric gestures, directing me down a side hallway, to the left, diverting from the main path that leads to the nurse's office. The area is dimly lit, with only a flickering light above him, casting eerie shadows that dance across the walls. I come to a halt. "No, it's this way. It'll take longer if you go that route. Trust me, I've walked this way countless times," he insists. I find myself hesitating, caught between my instincts and his reassurance. But then Eric's green eyes soften, and that familiar smile returns. This time it carries a sweetness that feels comforting. He motions for me to move forward. "Come on, I just want to get you some help as quickly as possible. I don't want you to faint or something." He lets out a light laugh, attempting to ease my tension. I steal one last glance down the main corridor, feeling another wave of nausea wash over me. He does have a point. I can't deny that. With a resigned sigh, I decide to follow Eric down the narrow passageway. How did I end up here? Where are we headed? The images of blood, the tiles beneath my feet, the black sneakers, the black jeans, the black jacket, and the black hair swirl around in my mind, blurring together. My memory feels fragmented, and I struggle to piece it all together. Eric strides ahead of me, his hands casually tucked into his pockets, whistling a tune. Suddenly, he stops in front of a yellow door set into the right wall, nestled between rows of lockers. "Here," he announces. "The shortcut." "It looks like a door," I reply, trying to inject some humor into the situation. "What an astute observation." He chuckles softly, his laughter gentle and soothing. "You must really be feeling unwell." "I'm not." "Shh. You don't need to waste your energy talking. Just follow me. We'll get you some help." "I promise," he reassures me. He opens the door and steps inside, leaving me uncertain about where he is leading me. Confusion washes over me. I don't understand why I am here. The images of black clothing, blood, and white tiles continue to swirl in my vision, creating a disorienting haze. Darkness, silence, drip, drip, drip. Reluctantly, I step inside after him. "Wait, what is—" Before I can finish my thought, the door slams shut behind me. It's dark, black blood, white tiles, black sneakers. Suddenly, I feel his hands gripping me. I try to scream, but no sound escapes my lips. Something rough covers my mouth, stifling my cries. In a panic, I bite down hard, tasting something metallic and warm. A curse escapes me, whispered harshly in the confined space. I realize then that I taste blood. My own, and there's so much of it. Blood, dripping, dripping, dripping. I begin to struggle violently. I fight with every ounce of strength within me, feeling adrenaline surge as I swing, bite, flail, and kick, desperate to shout, to scream. Black sneakers. Black jeans. Black jacket, black hair. Green eyes, once vibrant, now still and gone. I feel something pressing me against the door, making it difficult to breathe. Then I sense the lips against mine, and the metallic taste of blood overwhelms. A hand rests on my skin, sliding beneath my shirt, and an overwhelming sense of panic washes over me. "Remember, it was right next to you. On the desk. Reach for it. Stop resisting." The weapon glimmers in my mind's eye, a horrifying image that seems to pulse with every drop of blood. Dripping, dripping, dripping. No. Before that. "Search for it." "Yes." I recall the table. I can visualize it clearly now. The object's lying there, calmly illuminated by the soft light of the small office space, resting on the surface of a wooden desk. I freeze, halting all movement abruptly. The hands on me pause in shock at my sudden stillness. My hand shoots out to the left, and I begin to feel around in the darkness. I encounter something solid, a desk. My fingers glide across its surface. The hand on my skin resumes its movement. The grip around my neck tightens painfully. There it is, the scissors. I grasp them firmly in my hands. Drip, drip, drip. With a swift motion, I drive the blades into his chest. Stillness. The hand against my skin goes limp, and the other hand releases its hold on my neck. I hear him gasp sharply. Then he stumbles backward, losing his balance and falling. Silence. Everything comes to a standstill. I am breathing heavily. I realize I am alone in this moment. Dripping. The scissors remain clutched tightly. In my hand, with my free hand, I cautiously navigate along the wall until my fingers brush against the light switch. I flip it on. Eric lies motionless on the floor. He is silent. His attire consists of black sneakers, black jeans, and a black jacket. His hair is dark, tousled, and disheveled. His eyes are wide open, a striking green, yet devoid of life. I gaze down at the object I hold, observing as the blood trickles. Drips, drips from the cool silver blades onto the tile floor, transforming the once pristine white stone into a canvas stained with red. Every single moment I have spent with you has truly been among the most remarkable experiences of my life. You are an extraordinary person, but unfortunately, my heart is committed to someone else. As I watched the climactic final episode of The Bachelor, I found myself gasping in disbelief when Matt heartbreakingly broke Gail's heart into a million fragments. It was as if I could almost empathize with Gail's emotional turmoil through the screen. The anguish and sorrow she was experiencing felt so palpable that it became nearly unbearable for me to continue watching without shedding a few tears. This particular episode marked the grand finale, and I had taken the initiative to record it on my DVR, eagerly anticipating the chance to watch it after completing my shift at the hospital. The wait of 13 long hours was undoubtedly worth it, as I found myself perched on the edge of my seat, completely engrossed in the unfolding drama. When it comes to dating shows, I often allow my imagination to run wild, envisioning myself as the one standing on those opulent marble steps, adorned in a lavish crystal gown, being chosen by a dashing and affluent dark-skinned Adonis over a multitude of other contestants. My daydreaming was abruptly interrupted when the shrill sound of my phone ringing jolted me back to reality, reminding me of my solitary existence once more. Initially, I chose to disregard the call, increasing the volume on the television just as Matt was about to propose to Brittany. However, when it became evident that the caller was persistent, I reluctantly paused the recording and answered the unknown number. "Hello?" I said, unable to conceal my irritation. "Angie, is that you?" came the response, a voice that was painfully familiar, marked by age and sternness. "I told you to stop calling me." "How did you even get this number?" I retorted, feeling a surge of frustration. "It doesn't matter how I got it. What I need to tell you is significant, and even though you may have tried to sever ties with your only surviving grandmother and the rest of the family, deep down, you must know that I've always wanted what's best for you. Don't call here. Again. Please just leave me alone," I said firmly before hanging up, not willing to listen to another word. I had reached my limit with her, as well as with all the other eccentric individuals who dared to call themselves my family. From a very young age, I experienced bullying due to my family's background and beliefs. My journey began in New Orleans, Louisiana, where I was born into a family that practiced Vodun, a spiritual tradition deeply rooted in African culture. My relatives made their living by providing fortune-telling services and connecting with the spirits of the deceased. Shortly after my arrival into this world, my family relocated to a suburb in Florida. This new environment was predominantly inhabited by Christian individuals who were not particularly accepting of our Black Vodun practices, leading to a challenging adjustment for me. As I progressed through my teenage years and entered high school, I felt compelled to create distance between myself and my family's traditions. I made a conscious effort to keep my home life and school life as separate as possible. This separation prompted me to begin questioning the very foundation of Vodun itself. Over time, it started to feel like an outdated belief system to me. When I mustered the courage to express these thoughts to my grandmother, the reaction I received was shocking. The slap she delivered across my face was so powerful that I can still recall the burning sensation it left, even years later. My grandmother would often remind me, "No man could ever love you with a mouth like that. You will always be alone." Her words reinforced a damaging narrative that suggested a girl like me, chubby, with kinky hair and dark skin, was unworthy of love and affection. These messages weighed heavily on my self-esteem and sense of worth. Eventually, when I reached adulthood, I made the decision to leave my hometown and pursue nursing school in a different city. This move allowed me to sever ties with my grandmother and the rest of my family, a choice I embraced wholeheartedly without any intention of looking back. Starting anew in this fresh environment was liberating. I found joy in establishing my own routine, indulging in my favorite dating shows, and caring for my beloved Pomeranian, Lila. However, one morning, I woke up to find a voicemail from my grandmother waiting for me. Initially, I considered deleting, without listening, but curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to hear her out. In the message, she expressed remorse for the pain she had caused me, saying, "I know I caused you a great deal of pain, and for that I sincerely apologize. I don't know how anything I can say will ever make up for that." She continued, "I wish your forgiveness was the only reason for this call, but it is not. Angie, the gay day has chosen you. You must protect yourself or face the consequences. Consider this a warning." Her words struck me as utterly absurd. Was she attempting to intimidate me back into the Vodun practice after all the time I had spent distancing myself from it? Anger bubbled within me at the thought that she believed I could be swayed so easily. Without hesitation, I deleted the voicemail and blocked her number, determined to put that unsettling incident behind me once and for all. Half a year had passed since I began a romantic relationship with a man named Gabriel. He was genuinely sweet and kind-hearted, and while he may not have possessed the striking good looks of the contestants on The Bachelor, I still perceived him as perfect in every conceivable way. His presence brought joy into my life. One evening, while I was enthusiastically recounting my favorite episode of Love at First Sight at a charming restaurant that Gabriel had chosen for our date, he unexpectedly dropped to one knee and proposed, catching me completely off guard. "Angela Laga, will you marry me?" he asked earnestly. At that moment, my heart raced so loudly that I could hardly hear the applause erupting from the other diners in the restaurant. It felt like a scene straight out of a fairy tale, and I was living it. "Angela?" Gabriel called out again, his expression shifting to one of concern. Yes, I will," I managed to reply, filled with excitement and disbelief. We decided to move in together shortly after our engagement, but it wasn't long before I started noticing some peculiar occurrences around our home. My dog Lila would bark incessantly at a shadowy corner nestled between the kitchen cabinets, and despite my efforts, I could never pinpoint what she was reacting to. Additionally, an odd stain appeared on my bedroom ceiling, taking on a shape reminiscent of a tombstone, which left me feeling unsettled. To add to my unease, I could have sworn I heard faint drumming sounds during the late hours of the night. Then came the recurring night terrors that plagued my sleep. They followed a similar pattern each time. I would find myself walking through enormous doors leading into a grand castle where a lavish celebration was underway, complete with a feast that stretched endlessly before me. In these dreams, I struggled to see anyone's face clearly. All I could make out were their bright white smiles. Eventually, I would find myself seated on one of two thrones, the second throne occupied by someone whose identity remained a mystery. As I turned slowly, filled with dread about who or what might be sitting beside me, I would wake up screaming in sheer terror. Despite my attempts to seek help through therapy, I found little relief from my current afflictions. No amount of yoga or meditation seemed to grant me a peaceful night's sleep. I felt utterly defeated and devoid of options when a memory resurfaced from months earlier, something my grandmother had mentioned. It was about a Gado, or perhaps a Gede. It had been such a long time since I had even attempted to converse in my mother tongue that I had nearly forgotten the language altogether. That particular evening, I found myself waiting patiently until Gabriel had drifted off into a deep sleep, before I decided to type the strange term into an online search engine. To my surprise, the results revealed the Gede. My quest for knowledge consumed me for the majority of the night, and by the time I finally felt the need to pause my research, the first light of dawn was beginning to break through the darkness. Quietly, I slipped back into bed, but sleep eluded me. For the first time in what felt like ages, I found myself grappling with doubts about my skepticism towards Vodun. What if it were indeed genuine? I made the decision to take a day off from work, and as I leaned in to kiss Gabriel goodbye, he was on his way out the door for his job. "I love you very much," he said affectionately as he left. "I love you too," I replied, managing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes as I waved him off. Once I observed his car pulling out of the driveway, I took the opportunity to check my phone. I scrolled through my blocked contacts list until I located the number that belonged to my grandmother. "Hello, Yaya," I greeted her. "I haven't heard you call me that in quite some time. You must be feeling desperate. I'm guessing the situation has begun. The Gede has finally come to claim what is owed," she responded, her voice laced with concern. "You have to help me stop it. I can't, I stammered, my voice trembling with fear. "I tried to warn you, Angie. I'm truly sorry, but there's nothing I can do at this moment," she replied, her tone heavy with regret. At that moment, I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. Hearing those words confirmed the dread that had been gnawing at me. The Gede had haunted my family for generations, and in return for granting my bloodline the gift of sight, it demanded its price. A price that felt unbearably burdensome. A price that threatened to tear my heart apart. It sought the soul of my first love, just as it had done for every third generation of women born into my lineage. Is there absolutely nothing that can be done? I pleaded, desperation creeping into my voice. I'm deeply sorry. I prayed and connected with the spirits in hopes that it would bypass you. Unfortunately, I am not strong enough to stand against the Gede. My sight has dulled over the years. However, yours has always remained potent. You must forge the connection, she advised. So you were aware of all this the entire time? All those things you told me. You made me despise myself, made me feel unlovable, all because of this wretched curse. Why didn't you just come clean with me? I confronted her, hurt and anger bubbling to the surface. I was filled with shame. I struggled to find the right words. I made a mistake that I will never be able to rectify. It seems that this tendency runs in our family. I can only hope that one day you might find it in your heart to forgive me, she confessed, her voice tinged with sorrow. I require some time to fully comprehend everything that has just unfolded. I recommend that you come to terms with it quickly, young one. Once the Gede manifests in your dreams, you will have a mere 3 weeks before it claims the soul of someone dear to you. With that, I ended the call. It simply couldn't be true. My thoughts raced chaotically, spinning like a storm cloud on the verge of bursting, filled with all the repressed anguish and anxieties I had been harboring. I felt as though I was coming apart at the seams, adrift and uncertain about which path to take. I knew I needed to inform Gabriel, but how would he respond to this shocking revelation? Would he dismiss me as insane? I felt on the brink of madness myself. If Yaya's words held any validity, then Gabriel had only a week remaining before the Gede arrived. I sensed that I was straining my mind to its utmost capacity in search of a solution, and the fatigue from sleepless nights caused me to flinch, when a significant memory resurfaced. It was a recollection from my early childhood. I found myself encircled by family members who were chanting around me. Runes adorned my body as I trembled and convulsed, hovering a few inches above the ground, my consciousness shifting to another realm. In this otherworldly space, waterfalls cascaded freely, weaving through the sky in complex patterns, and from within this ethereal landscape, Oya emerged before me, a breathtaking figure with an afro who commanded the winds, expressing her delight at my visits in our ancestral language. Was that experience genuine? I had always dismissed it as merely a product of an overactive imagination. However, if I indeed possessed the sight, then I needed to discover a way to reconnect with Oya. I rummaged through my cupboard and found some liquid chalk, then made my way down to the basement, seeking to be as close to the earth as possible. There, I drew a circle, and shedding my clothes, inscribed runes on my body to the best of my recollection. I sincerely hope this endeavor proves successful, I murmured to myself as I concentrated, waiting for something to transpire. But as moments ticked by without any sign of change, I resolved to attempt speaking in my mother tongue to see if the words still flowed naturally. The instant I began, it felt as though I were overtaken by a force beyond my control. I chanted effortlessly as if I had never ceased using the language. Ajalaye ajalorun fan mini ire. Iba yansan. Ajalaye ajalorun fan mini alafia. Iba Oya. The winds of earth and heaven bring me good fortune. Praise to the Mother of Nine. The winds of earth and heaven bring me well-being. Praise to the Spirit of the winds. Almost instantaneously, I felt a peculiar sensation as my body began to resonate with energy, while an unusual wind swept through the room. To my astonishment, I found myself levitating a few inches above the ground. Despite the initial shock that coursed through me, I refused to let it deter me from continuing my chant. My thoughts turned to Gabriel, the one who occupied my heart and mind Ajalaye ajaloran funmini alafieba oya. In a moment of fervor I shouted out, and suddenly I was violently pulled from my physical form. This experience was far less enjoyable than I had recalled from my previous encounters. I realized that I had not practiced this in quite some time. Before my eyes, magnificent waterfalls twisted and danced intricately, while I floated weightlessly in midair, surrounded by nothing but an infinite expanse of blue, adorned with stunning waterfalls. The sheer beauty of the scene left me utterly mesmerized, yet it paled in comparison to the radiant presence of Oya, who emerged gracefully from one of the waterfalls, remaining completely dry. When she spoke, her words flowed in the ancient tongue. I am glad to see you here, child. It has been too long. I can see that you are in great pain. I'm sorry, Mama Oya, I managed to utter, bowing my head to conceal the tears that threatened to spill. I come bearing a request that I know I have no right to ask. Rise, child. There is nothing to fear here. There is no need for apologies. You are home. I understand why you have come. Please, Mama Oya, will you save him? Will you save Gabriel? Nothing can interfere with a spiritual pact, not even me. However, remember this, death is not always the end, she replied before departing in the same manner she had arrived. Confusion washed over me. Mama Oya, what does that mean? Just then, I was jolted awake by Gabriel, who looked horrified to find me lying naked in the basement, covered in markings all over my body. As I began to explain everything to him, it felt as if a tremendous burden had been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time, I felt completely exposed in front of him. If he chose to walk away after hearing my truth, I would be heartbroken, but I wouldn't hold it against him for even a moment. This was the dark chapter of my life, and my deepest fears were about to become a reality, just when I thought I was on the brink of finding happiness. What do we do now? He asked, breaking the heavy silence that hung between us. His question caught me off guard, leaving me momentarily disoriented. I struggled to comprehend his words. What did you say? I asked, seeking clarification. I said, what are we going to do now? I don't understand. You want to stay with me knowing all of this? For better or worse, Angie. I want you to know that I will always stand by your side. This is a commitment I am determined to uphold for my future. Wife, Gabriel declared, his face adorned with a warm and reassuring smile. The real question now is, will you continue to stand by me as well? Of course, you silly, goofy man, I replied affectionately. Great. It seems we have about a week before some spirit comes to claim my soul. Do you have any ideas on how we can handle this situation? I began to rack my brain, trying desperately to recall what Oya had said. What could she possibly mean when she mentioned that death isn't always the end? I pondered so intensely that I ended up giving myself a migraine that evening, ultimately deciding to take a break and try again the following day. When I woke up, Gabriel was already up early, and he had thoughtfully prepared a cup of coffee along with an Advil for me to help ease my headache. I took the liberty of calling your workplace to inform them that you wouldn't be coming in today. I told them it was a family emergency. I figured this definitely qualifies as one, he explained. I chuckled at his attempt to lighten the mood, but I couldn't ignore the fear that was evident in his eyes. I think I might have come up with a solution, he continued. What Oya said, what if you just killed me? Have you completely lost your mind? I shouted in disbelief. How could you even suggest something so outrageous? No, wait, hear me out. What I meant was, what if you made me stop living, just temporarily? Initially, I struggled to grasp what he was proposing, but after a few moments of contemplation, the realization hit me like a bolt of lightning. You're a genius, I exclaimed, filled with excitement, though it quickly turned into concern. However, this plan is incredibly risky. I would be willing to take any risks in this world if it meant I could keep holding your hand, he said, intertwining his fingers with mine in a gesture of affection and determination. In the following days, I dedicated myself to my work, meticulously examining where specific vials were kept. I intentionally ignored the concerned inquiries from my colleagues who were worried about whether everything was all right at home. I couldn't afford to let anything divert my attention from my objective. Fortunately, I had established such a strong reputation in my workplace that no one seemed to notice when I discreetly entered the storage area and left with 3 vials of medication. According to Yaya's spiritual communications, it would only be a matter of hours before the Gede would come for Gabriel. But thankfully, we were nearing the completion of our preparations. We relocated a mattress to the basement, where I had set up a manual oxygen pump along with 3 syringes filled with lidocaine, adenosine, and adrenaline. I had carefully drawn a protective circle around us, although I wasn't entirely confident that it would effectively keep the Gede at bay. Still, it felt like a worthwhile attempt. As I lay beside Gabriel, we waited in anxious silence. Around 3 a.m., the house began to tremble violently as a crack formed in the basement floor, disrupting the protective circle I had created. Before anything else, I made sure to express my love, saying, "Whatever happens, know that I love you." Gabriel responded, and as we shared a kiss, I realized just how inadequate the kisses portrayed on The Bachelor were compared to the depth of this moment we were experiencing together. Suddenly, the lights in the basement started to flicker, and I noticed Gabriel wince in pain. It was then that I saw what he could not. The Gede loomed above him, seemingly indifferent to my presence, floating ominously and siphoning the very life out of him. I knew I had to act immediately. I injected both syringes into his arm, watching helplessly as he gradually ceased to breathe. In that moment, it felt as though I had lost my own ability to draw breath. I was left uncertain as to whether it was the Gede or the drugs that had triumphed over him. In a frantic attempt to assess the situation, I checked his pulse, a routine action I had performed countless times during my shifts at the hospital. However, this time, my heart raced so rapidly that I mistakenly confused my own heartbeat with the absence of his pulse. It became painfully clear. He was gone. The Gede, sensing that something was not quite right, decided to retreat. This moment of hesitation provided me with a crucial opportunity. I quickly took action and plunged the 3rd syringe, which was filled with adrenaline, directly into Gabriel's heart. However, when he did not immediately awaken, a wave of panic washed over me. Could it be possible that the Gede had succeeded in its dark intentions? Just at that moment, to my immense relief, Gabriel suddenly jerked awake. Instinctively, I wrapped my arms around him as he struggled to catch his breath, overwhelmed by the suddenness of his revival. Meanwhile, the Gede, furious and agitated, began to howl, its eyes glowing red with an intense fury. It charged towards me, filled with rage and malevolence, but just as it seemed poised to strike, a portal opened up between us. This portal acted like a vacuum, pulling the Gede into another realm, one that was remarkably different, characterized by serene blue skies and cascading waterfalls. As I stood there watching, I witnessed the Gede undergo a transformation. It morphed into something entirely different, something that radiated purity and light. Just as the portal began to close, "Behind it, Oya," I exclaimed, a mix of surprise and wonder escaping my lips. With a swift motion, I drive the blades into his chest. Stillness. The hand against my skin goes limp, and the other hand releases its hold on my neck. I hear him gasp sharply, then he stumbles backward, losing his balance and falling. Silence. Everything comes to a standstill. I am breathing heavily. I realize I am alone in this moment. Dripping, the scissors remain clutched tightly in my hand. With my free hand, I cautiously navigate along the wall until my fingers brush against the light switch. I flip it on. Eric lies motionless on the floor. He is silent. His attire consists of black sneakers, black jeans, and a black jacket. His hair is dark, tousled, and disheveled. His eyes are wide open, a striking green, yet devoid of life. I gaze down at the object I hold, observing as the blood drips from the cool silver blades onto the tile floor, transforming the once pristine white stone into a canvas stained with red.